Hi everyone, my name is Jesse and we're the Antiscammers. Our project is a detailed analysis on scam call centers. So first of all, we're going to go over the table of contents for our presentation. First, we're going to define some key terms about cybercrime and scam call centers. Then we're going to go over our research questions and the importance of them. Then we're going to go over our case studies, and finally we're going to do the takeaways. So defining some of the key terms. Some of the questions that we're going to ask is what is cybercrime? What are the most common types of cybercrimes? Who is affected the most by cybercrime? What are some of the numbers, and what are scam call centers?
Hello everyone, my name is M. So what is cybercrime? In order to understand what scam call centers are and how they work, we must first define what cybercrime actually is. The cybersecurity firm Avast defines cybercrime simply as any illegal activity carried out using computers or the internet. And here in this graph, we could see the four types of cybercrimes that are the most common, and we can see phishing, non-payment delivery, personal data breach, and identity theft. So who is affected the most by cybercrime? According to the FBI Internet Crime Report, most victims of cybercrime are over the age of 60, and it is important to note that this group also incurs the greatest monetary losses at over $1.6 billion. And what are scam call centers? So definition, scam call centers are real call centers where large enterprises set up operations for the sole purpose of scamming victims out of money using a variety of scamming techniques. Exception, some security tech companies like Norton report that scam call centers are present in some Central American countries like Costa Rica and Venezuela. So the location, according to the United States Department of Justice, over 70% of the calls generated to target American consumers come directly from India.
Hi guys, I'm John, and to talk about the research questions that we have, first is talking about what tools and techniques do scam call centers use to perform technical support, merchant or bank-related, and government-related scams. Second is, what are the steps or specific actions possible victims or their families can take in order to prevent these types of scams?
Okay, so the first study we want to discuss is the IRS scam calls. We want to go over the targets, the tools, why this particular scam is so effective, and some of the preventions that we can use in order to prevent this scam. So who exactly is affected the most by this scam? Well, we know that the targets of this scam are foreign nationals, such as immigrants and international students. Why? Because this group is particularly susceptible to being threatened with jail time, and they may also be unaware of how tax laws work in the United States. Specifically, we want to look into a case study involving a group of students at Penn State that documented their experiences with IRS scams. We know that this specific scam goes underreported, and in fact, the Internet Crime Report states that only an estimated 15% of the nation's fraud victims report their crimes to law enforcement. So what are some of the tools that are used for this scam? We know that scammers are starting to use social engineering and phishing. So social engineering is defined as an attempt to trick someone into revealing information that can be used to attack systems or networks. So first, scammers will send out an email campaign of hundreds, if not thousands of emails to potentially get information from victims. This is an example of one email template that cyber criminals might use. An additional tools that scammers are starting to use is Caffeine. Caffeine is a shared phishing as a service platform that is open to anyone as a subscription service, and it offers users a few different features like pre-made templates in English and Chinese, the ability to track the success of campaigns, and dynamic URLs. These are the examples of templates that they provide their users. So why is this scam so effective? Well, scammers are getting better tools. They're collecting more sensitive information about their targets to make their scams more believable. And additionally, the targets that the scammers usually call, they're vulnerable, so they're more likely to believe them.
So here in this case study, the second case study, it's about technical support scam calls, and we're going to look at targets, effectiveness, prevention, and tools. So what are technical support scams and how do they work, and who are the targets of this type of scam? Technical support scams attempt to trick users into fixing a problem that is not even there, and more often than not, the people that get scammed by technical support scam calls are usually older people. These scammers use tactics that aim to trick and deceive people in order to get people to pay them for fixing a technical problem that does not even exist. So maladvertising is one of the main culprits in tech support scams. Sometimes users land on web pages with pop-up warnings with a number to call stating that their computer has been infected with malware and that they should call that number in order to fix that problem, which we know does not exist. So what are the tools used for this scam? So here in this charts, we can see that this table shows that the most popular tools that scammers use are remote administration tools, which we can see here, and the techniques right here in this chart show us that the techniques that they use to convey users that their machines are infected with malware or malfunctioning, such as telling victims that they have stopped services or stopped drivers on their devices. So why is this type of scam so effective? As we can see by this graph, it shows that the profit of tech support scams has increased over the last few years. It is not surprising to see that there was a spike in 2021 of the amount of money that was lost due to tech scams. With the rise of online technology and the use of the internet during COVID, there was about $347 million lost in 2021 compared to in 2017, where we can see that it was $14 million lost. So we can see the increase of the profit. So what specifically can we do to prevent these types of scams? We know that legitimate companies will not contact a person over the phone or through text message to let them know that there is a problem with their computer. Legitimate companies will also not use pop-up warnings and ask a user to call a certain number. And tech companies should not be the ones reaching a person if there is a problem with their computer. If a user sees an issue with a device, they should go to a trustworthy and reputable company to seek for help. We should be skeptical and aware of the tactics that technical support scammers use. Tech scammers often attempt to intimidate, frighten, and pressure people. So you should not call any number that pops up on your screen. And make sure that computers are up to date with antivirus software. Do not trust anyone or trust their word, and do not give access to your computer to anyone to go through them, and because this will just make things worse.
So now let's talk about our third case study, merchants and bank-related scams. I will go over the tools, the effectiveness of these tools, and how we can identify this type of scam, and even what preventative measures we can take. So who are the primary targets of this type of scam? Unfortunately, it's everyone. Anyone who doesn't even have the correct bank account may be targeted by this specific type of scam because it is very easy to automate. So what are the tools used for this scam? First, we have voice call phishing, which is basically the traditional voice calls that we're used to associating with scam call centers. Next is mobile text messaging. Since after years of banks encouraging their customers to sign up for SMS text messages, scammers are now spoofing those lines in order to impersonate banks. And lastly is regular phishing. which are sent through emails that now sometimes use legitimate systems used by popular institutions. To expand these tools, let's go over one that I found interesting. It's Zelle. So as of last year, these scammers are taking a new spin on this particular scam involving Zelle by first, as you see here in this image, sending a victim a text message that would normally come from your bank account, telling you or warning you that an identified payment is trying to be validated from your account to another person. Naturally, somebody would reply no, but these scammers are then using this information to call the victim immediately and pretend that they're a representative from the bank in order to get their personal information from the victim. So to go into more detail, first we have the phishing that comes from text messages. That leads into the voice phishing. They gather their personal information and then they cash out using Zelle. Another similar example is PayPal. As PayPal has become one of the most widely used financial institution for payment, scammers are using a feature that PayPal has for sending an invoice from one user to another one. And while these invoices are fraudulent, they come from PayPal services and are incredibly difficult to know that it's a scam from a glance. This only uses first the email phishing to hopefully get a victim to call the line that they have in the actual email. And then it goes through the typical steps we associate with scam call center. So how do we identify these tools? First of all is that there's almost always a sense of urgency or threat that is involved with these scams. Second of all is a typical bad grammar that most of them have, or an awkward wording and how their messages are composed. And third of all is that sometimes we don't expect a payment that is there, and if we look at it closely, it kind of falls apart because it doesn't make any sense. So why are these scams effective? First of all, they're choreographed very well. So if somebody is unfortunate enough to fall for one step, they're very likely to fall to the second step and so on and so forth. Second of all is that there's no reimbursement for Zelle in particular. So if you're scammed, you're kind of out of luck and you really can't do much about it in most cases. Third of all is that they use legitimate tools. As we saw with PayPal, these emails are sent directly from PayPal, so there's actually no way to know if it's legitimate or fraudulent unless you call them or you check your PayPal account. So how do we stop these types of crimes? First of all, is to never provide personal information to an unknown person. Always ask callers, ask questions to the callers. Since they're usually reading off a script, they don't have an understanding of how these systems work. Also, it's to be suspicious of the claims they make and not trust just because you see it in your email or your text messages. And lastly is to actually report them. Since you might not be able to recover your losses, you might be able to help someone else.
So what are some of the takeaways that we got from researching these case studies? Well, first of all is that we have to defend vulnerable people. Most of the scams are perpetrated on groups that are already vulnerable, such as the elderly and immigrants and international students. And we have to spread awareness about these particular scams so that they can understand how they work. Second of all, cybercrime as an industry, and it's growing, and criminals are investing in better tools, in more knowledge, and more people. Finally, the availability of tools is increasing, so tools are becoming easier to find and easier to use.
So, calls to action, bank, merchant, and scams. We must press for legislation to force banks and financial institutions to reimburse victims of these scams. Currently, financial institutions such as Zelle have no incentive to stop scammers because they are not held liable for people abusing their systems. For their system. Tech support scams. It is important to maintain antivirus software and to never give control of personal computers without any concrete reason. It is also important to recognize legitimate tech companies and not click links on pop-up warnings or in any email. IRS scams. Government agencies must push awareness campaigns for everyone in the U.S. These campaigns must emphasize the official channels by which the IRS communicates. Emphasis must be put on what government agencies do and don't ask when communicating them. And also very important, they don't ask for personal information.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. Do you have any questions for us?